Welcome to the Distinctive Christianity Podcast, where we normally compare creedal, Christian, and Mormon thought. Today, we have the kind of story that you typically don't hear under the umbrella of Mormon stories, really Christian stories with a Mormon flavor. We have with us an elder from Crossroads in Sandy. We've had another one of the elders from there, Dr. Matthew Amati, on here before. If you haven't heard that interview, you should go check that out on his book. Well, we have one of his colleagues, James Phelps, here, who grew up in Mormonism in the LDS Church and has entered the ministry, Christian ministry, and as we will get to toward the end, will be church planting in the St. George, Utah area. You served an LDS mission, correct, in Taiwan?
I did, yeah. I served in Taipei, Taiwan.
It's amazing. So the story of someone who served an LDS mission to Taiwan is now serving a Christian mission to the people of the St. George area. So this is great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. No, it's good to be here, Skyler. Appreciate it.
So start at the beginning. Tell us your story.
Well, I come from a very strong Mormon stock. I would say my Mormon upbringing was about as traditional as it gets, I think. I was born in the early 70s in the Mesa, Arizona area. And for those who don't know, Mesa is one of the big Mormon hubs outside of Utah. You have Idaho and you have Mesa area, and that's where I was born. So I was born into just a great family. Mom and dad, and there's 10 of us kids. I was number 4 out of 10. And actually spent most of my life in Gilbert. We moved to Gilbert, Arizona when I was 8 years old. And we just did all the things that Mormon families do. Both my parents have passed away now, but all my brothers and sisters are still there in the Mesa, Gilbert area, very close to where we grew up. And our life was just centered around the church. Mormonism, as you know, is not just about what you do on Sunday. It is a lifestyle. It is a culture. And that was all I knew. It is really amazing how you can grow up in an area and not know anybody outside of Mormonism. Very few people did I interact with regularly anyway. That was not people that I went to church with. And so, we did certainly the church on Sundays. Actually, when I was younger, church was broken apart, and there was the main part of church, and then there was the youth or the primary programs were during the week. But for the most part, it was the 3-hour church block that we went to. Our Sundays were very Sabbath-oriented, which in the Mormon view is that you don't go out and play. You stay home and do quiet activities. We read or we play games together. We were a very close family, and still our family. My dad both my parents were very good about doing things together as a family, and so we spent a lot of time together. We would have our family home evening on Monday nights. That was where you take the phone off the hook back then, so nobody could interrupt your Monday nights, and do a little lesson. And my dad had magnets on the fridge for what all of our assignments were. He was very organized. So this person's doing the song, this person's got the family history part, this person's doing the lesson, this person's in charge of dessert, and so it was all very, very organized. So Monday nights, Wednesday nights was our young women's activities. I was very much involved in the scouting program growing up. I was a third generation of Eagle Scouts. We actually had pictures. There was a big picture when my brother got his Eagle Scout of my grandpa and my dad and my brother, all Eagle Scouts. And then we did another one with all the brothers that got Eagle Scouts. So that was just part of my life, scouting and everything was what we did. So, upbringing wise, that was just very typical. That's what I knew. I enjoyed it. There was didn't know any different, and I was definitely a box checker. I was one that wanted to follow the rules, and so as over the years, when you turned 12, you had advanced in the priesthoods, and so I was always right in line, with the timelines of doing the right thing at the right time, and the president of my quorums and all those different things. And eventually got into my years of preparing for a mission.
Your family when they settled there, do you have pioneer ancestry? Do you know some of the history of when Mormonism entered your family by chance?
Yes, and I should know better. My dad was an avid genealogist, and I've got books and books of genealogy that I should know better. But yeah, no, my family goes. We were part of the group that Brigham Young sent from the Salt Lake area to help settle the Mesa, Arizona area.
Wow!
And so yeah, our family goes on both sides. Both my mom and my dad's side go pretty much to the very origins of the Mormon Church.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So take us through, especially for the Christians that would be listening. So 8 years old, baptism, 12 years old, deacon, 14 years old, teacher, 18 years old, priest.
16.
16, sorry. And I'm already forgetting. And then the whole time, the assumption is you're going to serve it to your mission. It's not presented to you as right? I mean, you will be serving this mission.
For sure, yeah. They always labeled it as volunteer, but that's it's kind of a Hobson's choice, right? It's either you go or you don't, and you have that stigma attached to you. And
forever.
You most certainly will not be marrying a faithful Mormon girl because she won't marry somebody who's not a returned missionary. And so, yeah, it's very much an expectation. My older brother went. I knew I was going to go, and my brothers after me all went. So it was very much an expectation for sure. And I can't say that I dreaded it. It was an exciting thing that I was looking forward to, an adventure that I wanted to get out and see the world. I actually had hoped to go to I think my first choice was Russia. It was when Russia was starting to open up. I don't know if you remember that era. And I was in my first year of college at ASU. I actually took Russian language courses, hoping that I'd get called to Russia. But I was excited when I got called to Taiwan. My brother had went to Korea, so I was kind of familiar with the Asian missions.
Interesting. Did your family, a lot of them go to Asia, or just you and your brother?
Just me and my brother. Okay. And another one down in South America. Another one stayed in the States.
So take us through. So you enter an application, you get your call, and then take us through your mission period. And that process leading up to it, it was grinding. I mean, they really worthiness, and I think there maybe has been a shift in that now, but certainly in my day, whether or not you were worthy to go on a mission is a big deal, and that was the statement by. Which prophet was it? I think it was Benson. Said every worthy young male should go on a mission. And so the question then becomes, well, are you worthy? And so there was a long process to make sure of that. And they kind of want to clean house. It's like I'd go through this series of interviews with the bishop of my ward first, really digging into the past, saying, what things do we need to confess that you haven't? And then you got to go through it again with the stake president and reconfess all these sins in your past, anything that you're feeling guilty about or anything. And I was pretty a guilt-driven person. I was very aware, I think, of my sins and my brokenness growing up. And so having that awareness and not knowing how to deal with it, I was like, I guess I got to get it all on the table because this is the way that I get forgiveness is through this mediator between me and the bishop or the stake president. And so a very intimidating and not fun process. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing that I recall riffing off that is especially if I got the sense that others didn't feel that, have that sin awareness. What I guess we wouldn't have called it that at the time, but sin awareness. Others that didn't have that, you felt a little alienated from, like in these types of topics. But really, also combined with the emphasis on agency, even once you confess and go through the process and receive forgiveness, I guess the check mark that you've been forgiven for this one, at least until we ask you about it again. I had that experience as well where, we've dealt with it. And then you go to the stake president, dig it all up again. Even the stuff that you thought was taken care of. I went through that in the MTC even. But then because it's all on your use of your agency, every moment is a threat. That's right. There's no sense of, God can only save those who help themselves, I guess, so you have to be in this pure space, at least pure enough that, he can reach you or something.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And when you define repentance as, this 5-step process, I can remember there was like the 5 R's, right? Remorse and restoration and, confession, all those things. I can remember there's 5 R's they used, but it's just this process, and you got to keep going through it, because if you repent of something and then you commit the same sin, where you're back to ground zero, right?
Yep.
And you got to start
all
over
the
again.
others return. D&C
right.
82, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's a never-ending process. It's very much focused on me. I'm looking to myself. How can I overcome this? And it's just this never-ending cycle. And if I could characterize the way that I was processing all of this, I would go to church and, you hear that convicting talk, that's addressing some sin that I'm dealing with. And so I go home and I go, I got to deal with this. And should I confess it? It's always vague whether it's something you're supposed to confess or not. I always wanted to err on the side of confessing, but it's embarrassing. And so you got to, so you live with it for a year till you finally muster up the courage to go tell your bishop. And then maybe he'll, depending on who the bishop is, maybe he says, well, you can't take the sacrament for 2 weeks. And so when the sacrament being communion, and so I would be sick for the next 2 Sundays, so I wouldn't have to be embarrassed by having the tray pass by me, because everybody knows.
Because then everybody looks. And
if you're not taking it, then something's wrong, right?
Oh, I have to. Sorry, this is probably bad manners on this, but I have to tell you this story. This is my sister-in-law. So she had some family event. This is fairly recently. So she attends an LDS sacrament meeting for someone, maybe it was her homecoming of her brother or something. And of course she didn't take the sacrament, and she heard a little kid right behind her ask his mom, why isn't she taking the sacrament? And the mom said, because she's a sinner.
Yeah, at least she said out loud what everybody else is thinking.
Everybody's thinking, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, but that's the mentality, is that you can do it. You can be in this state of purity, this state of, they wouldn't maybe use the term sinless, and then you just maintain that. And the payoff is why the emphasis on the missionaries is, really everybody, but is the power, right? You can't just speak the message. The Spirit, if you're not worthy, won't attend to the message.
That's right.
And aid you in your convincing process as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there's so much to it, right? It's you think you're taught that if I'm in sin, then the Spirit leaves me. If I'm giving a priesthood blessing because somebody's sick, then it's going to have no effect because I'm unworthy. Right? It touches every aspect of your life. Whenever there's something bad going on in my life, I assume that this is God telling me that I'm in sin. Right? Because if I'm not, then things should be going well. And so that was certainly my mindset growing up. And it's just this vicious cycle, because you go through the process and then you exercise some willpower for a time. And then you fall again, because it's really what's inside of us. The brokenness inside never really gets dealt with. And so it comes up again. And then you feel guilty. Eventually go to the bishop again. And just this never-ending cycle. Once I got to the mission, and it's like this, it's almost like you're starting with a clean slate. It's like, all right, I've said everything, right? I just want to start with a clean slate. I'm going to put on that black badge and go represent Christ and go share the gospel, And, but then, gosh, I think probably the hardest part of my mission was realizing, oh my gosh, I'm now a representative of Christ, an ambassador of Christ, and on the outside, everything looks great, but I still carried that same brokenness with me into the mission field. Right? I'm still that same broken guy, and now I feel doubly guilty, because I feel like a hypocrite now, because I'm on a mission sharing the gospel, but I know my brokenness inside. I always felt like I was the only one too that struggled with these problems. Yeah. In Taiwan, like the sexual imagery is all over. It's on billboards, it's on magazines all over, And so, just as this teenage kid, my eyes are just being drawn all over the place. When I'm riding my bike around, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, what a wreck I am. And so it just got worse on my mission. On the one hand, I was very devote. I was a hard worker. I was one to follow all the rules on the mission. We had a little white Bible, they would call it. They would carry in our shirt pocket all of the mission rules. what time you wake up, what you can wear, how long your preparation day, your day off should be, what you can do on your preparation day, what you can't, all these things. It was very structured, much more so even than it is today. And so I was one to, I'm going to do all that. And I knocked on so many doors. I worked so hard. I drove a couple of my companions crazy just because they couldn't keep up with me. I was just so motivated to just work hard. Put your shoulder to the wheel. Right? That's how the old Mormon hymn goes.
Oh, yeah.
And that was my motto. I was going to go and work hard. And I did.
And the obedience, once again, comes with open access to power, right? Like the more you fall, I remember them saying, if you're not having success, it's maybe you're not following the rules enough.
That's right.
That it's explicitly taught that way.
Yeah.
They may run from it now and maybe try to say, don't be perfectionistic. I don't know if you saw in the manual last year, they had this, I think it must have been a conference talk from Holland or someone like that, where they were emphasizing the problem of perfectionism. I just thought, but they didn't soften the emphasis on covenant obedience or anything. So it's just they don't want the symptom of this system.
That's right.
But
that's right.
Anyway, not to distract from that.
No, but it's right there in their scripture, right?
Absolutely.
All blessings are predicated upon obedience to the laws and ordinances of the gospel.
Absolutely.
Tie blessings to obedience.
Yep. And I think D&C 82:10, if you do what I say, I am bound. If you do not what I say, you have no promise, or something similar.
Yep.
When during this time, as you're teaching, when do you see yourself becoming more intellectually aware? Was it there the whole time? I mean, how would you describe your doctrinal understanding and commitment at this time? Like more than just even the living part, but the goal of Mormonism, the deeper Mormon doctrine, was that a part of your family growing up, or how?
For sure, yeah. We were very traditional doctrinally, and back then doctrine was actually taught, unlike today.
Yeah.
You go to church today, from what I see and hear from others, is there's not much doctrine being taught. But yeah, even leading up to the mission, there was I don't know if you remember the 4 missionary books that had to be read. Right, it was The Miracle of Forgiveness by Kimball. It was James Talmage's Jesus the Christ. What were the other ones? The Great Apostasy.
Yep. James Talmage.
Yep. And then there was one other, but there's the 4-pack that you had to go get it at Deseret Book. And I remember going through those. But yeah, doctrine was taught, and I didn't question. I was very aware of what the expectations were, what the end goal was of celestial exaltation, of progressing to godhood. All those things were very much a part of my belief system.
And one thing I think I failed to mention, you go through your endowment before the mission. What was, when you went through for your first time, what was it like for you? Did you feel prepared?
I think as much as one could be. They're so secretive about what goes on in the temple. So going in, there's always that anticipation of, what is this, right? I'm going into this ceremony of some type called an endowment. I know it's important. I know it's a step to my progression, but I have no idea what it is because you're not allowed to talk about it outside of the temple. Right. I was very prepared in the sense again, but my preparation was mostly based on, am I worthy to go in? That was always my focus. Right. So in that sense, I felt like I was prepared and passed the temple recommend interview. But I had no expectation of what it was going to be. And then you go in and you just kind of, at least for me, I just took it in. I wasn't really in a place of questioning at that time of why are they doing this? Why is this so weird? That's, my mind wasn't even there. I'm just excited to get on this mission. Yeah. I know this is a step to get there, so I'm going to go through it. And you go through it, and I can't say anything jumped out at me doctrinally. It seemed pretty basic. It was the creation account through the Mormon lens, and then various rituals and different things that you're doing to pass the bar, if you will, at the next step. But I don't remember anything doctrinally that jumped out at me. It seemed pretty basic, really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to that, because that's something that, it's hard to, especially in the post-Mormon space, we see how sacred it is to them. you want to talk about it,
Right,
but,
right.
but at the same time, there is still that kind of expectation you don't. But I think it's key to see the first time you go through for yourself, and every time after that, it's for, I mean, preferably your own ancestors from the genealogical work that your family has done. But, you know, tons of names are assigned to a temple. So you are assigned a name, even if you don't have one of your own. And you go through repetitively. So it's ritual predicated upon obedience and worthiness. You get access to further spiritual blessings and protection and insight into this eternal progression process and where we are at the point we are now on our way to godhood, really,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I think, is that fair?
Yeah, that's right.
I think for me, what stood out the most was the veil to get into the celestial room.
Yep.
And for those who don't know, you have certain signs, tokens, so hand gestures, shakes, and you have to say it exactly right. And of course, the first time they'll work with you,
Right.
but the expectation, at least, was you're going to memorize it, so you know every single word to say at the veil to then go through, so they cannot hold you back.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
So it's very important, I would say.
Yeah.
Embodiment of Mormon doctrine in a way that just reading the Book of Mormon, I don't think will capture.
Yeah.
Would you say that's?
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. And yet it seemed very consistent too with what I had been raised as far as the overall path and direction. In a sense, I'm like, well, yeah, this makes sense. There's more I need to learn. The fact that there's more covenants that I need to promise I'm going to keep. And then you add a few handshakes and tokens and symbols and rehearse the right lines. And then that man on the other side of the veil pulls you through.
Yep.
Saying, now you may enter.
Yep.
And that seemed very consistent overall with the doctrine I'd been taught.
Mm-hmm. And as you get further along, there's more light.
That's
I mean, it was physical light in the building of the temple in the old ones. My favorite were the old ones, like Manti, where you actually travel through the rooms and you get a sense of the different kingdoms, really. But I guess the new ones, it's just you change the lights and stay in the same room and just kind of imagine you're in a different place.
Yes.
So you go through that, you go to the temple. Tell us about your mission experience overall and how you viewed it at the time, viewed it as an LDS, and look back on it now. I mean, I think in the evangelical community, there's a lot of emphasis on missions, but I don't think they have anything like this in mind.
Yeah.
This regulated, isolated 2 years, foreign country, new language. I'm assuming it was an incredibly difficult language to learn. Yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah, it was a mixed bag for sure. So I went to the MTC, the Missionary Training Center in Provo. Spent 2 months there where you're just inundated with just more doctrinal teaching, memorizing that time of 6 discussions that we had to essentially have memorized in the foreign language. These are the lessons that we would teach to those who were investigating the church. And so you at least start that process. But yeah, it was a mixture of language learning and doctrinal teaching. And you're there with, there's another dozen guys that were going to the same mission and go through that together. And it's just a boot camp is essentially what it is. It's like they own you. They tell you what time to eat, what you can do. I remember we were trying to find any outlet to express our individuality. And we did the funniest things. I don't know if you remember, there was it's called like the hall or the wall of presidents or something, this long hallway that had all the pictures of the past MTC presidents. Yeah. Every night we would take one of those off the wall and bring it to our dorm and take pictures with this past president. We would save our bed sheets. We're supposed to turn them in every week and they give us new ones. We'd actually save them and we'd tie our bed sheets together and rappel out of our window, outside of hanging onto these bed sheets, just weird things like that, just to stay sane and try to show I'm not just one of the one of the numbers. But it is fun. It's when you're going through it with other guys and you just commiserate together, and then they ship you off. And I remember getting shipped off to Taiwan. my luggage got lost. And so I get off the plane, and the mission president is there to meet me. All I have is my tennis racket, because I was a tennis player, and I was determined to bring my tennis racket to Taiwan, thinking I'd actually have time to play tennis. So I walk off the plane with my tennis racket, and I see my mission president, like, oh no, it's going to be one of those, you know.
Oh my goodness.
You know, then you spend a couple of days at the mission home, and then they assign you your senior companion, and you're gone. It's like you have, you're at the mercy of the senior companion who's a year older than me, and he's you know, we can get on a bike, and I've got my big suitcase on a bike, driving through the traffic in Taiwan, trying not to get hit by buses and taxi cabs, and it is total culture shock. You know, I don't understand this language. At the MTC, you think you actually learned something, and you get there, I have no idea what these people are saying, and it's just quite an experience.
Did you have much success finding people who were interested?
It was hard. That was the first year. Man, did I work hard. And I remember getting to, I think it was my second or third area, because they transfer you to different areas after a few months. And it was probably the bottom of my mission experience. I was with this companion who was really hard. I was now senior companion, and he did not want to be there. And we didn't get along. And yet you have to be together 24/7. You can't be out of sight of your missionary companion. And we ended up getting in some big argument, and I was just so embarrassed because it's public in front of people, and I thought he was just the worst guy ever. And I just remember going to the balcony of my apartment, and I just broke down crying because we hadn't had a single baptism yet. And, you know, and you have to report these things. It's about numbers, right? How many Book of Mormons did I pass out? How many discussions did I teach? How many baptisms are there? And I knew Taiwan would not be an easy mission. They're mostly Buddhist or agnostic, most of them there. And but after a year, to be working that hard and to have no fruit from what I could tell, I just remember breaking down and saying, man, I don't know if I'm going to make this. But then I wake up the next morning and you just keep going. If there's one thing I was good at, it was just keep going, just my persistence. I just wouldn't give up. You know, and eventually in my mind it got better. We had a few baptisms here and there. There was one family I remember that I taught from beginning to end. We found them, we knocked on their door, we taught them all the discussions, and they were baptized as a family. And that was kind of my pride and my joy in the mission. I got a family, you know, so I've got an eternal family I helped make here. You know? And so there was, you know, some fruit from what I could tell over time, but it was not easy. It was slow going for sure.
What in that culture, what was harder to teach and, you know, more natural for them to hear and less natural for them to hear? I mean, I'm trying to think, they're thinking, okay, restoration, they don't even have Christianity to have the apostasy narrative applied to. So what, right? I mean,
that's right.
So how, yeah. Do you recall what kind of, that made sense to them, that this, I had to find a way to explain it this other way, or anything like that with that family? I
remember spending a lot of time just talking about God, right? Because the first 2 pages of the first discussion were about God and Jesus. And then you're right into Joseph Smith and all of the unique Mormon doctrines. And so I remember what struck me, and the intuition was right, although of course I was misguided in the doctrine, but it's like these people don't even know who God is. Their concept of God is so different than mine. And so I can't rush to the Joseph Smith story because they don't even know who God and Jesus is. Mm-hmm. And so I actually would spend a lot of time on those first couple principles of the first discussion about God and Jesus Christ, and just have discussions with them about my view of God versus theirs, if they had any concrete notion of God, whatever it might be. And really kind of camping out there for a while. And then eventually getting into the discussions about Joseph Smith and the first vision and tithing and all those things that you teach later on. So from that standpoint, I found it unique, you know, that because they encourage you just really get to Joseph Smith as quick as you can. But I never felt like I could get there that quick, and I would spend a lot of time on the front end.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So let's see, was there anything else you wanted to say on your mission?
No, I worked hard, came home.
Okay, What was it like coming home? I mean, 2 years of this being your life, and then what?
Yeah. Now it's like, gosh, there's all this structure, right? And I actually served my last 4 months as the assistant to the president. And so I was actually in the mission home for the last few months of the mission. And, and that's, yeah, I mean, overall, it's like that mission it really was a mixed bag for me. On the outside, I knew that I'd done everything right. On the inside, I felt like, I'm going home as far as my purity, as far as my righteousness, my worthiness is about where it was before. You know what I mean? And I remember that being hard on my inside, even though I could put up the external show. So the next step was to get married, and I remember actually having my going home interview with the mission president, and he made very clear, time to go get busy and find yourself a woman, find yourself a wife to enter that next step of the eternal marriage. And so I got home right before school, the semester was starting. So I just jumped right back into Arizona State where I was attending school there. I'd already got 1 year behind me. And so I just jumped right back in. So yeah, for years there, I just kind of just kept going through the motions. I was going through school. I was now attending a young adult ward. I was dating a lot. I think I went on so many blind dates. When you got 10 kids in the family and a very well-known family in the area, everybody's setting you up on blind dates, trying to help you get married. That kind of characterizes my college years. Was just working hard to get through school, and a lot of blind dates, but still very much in it. Yeah, and my plan was always to go to law school. And so I jumped into law school right after my graduation from Arizona State. A bit surprised where I ended up going was BYU.
Interesting.
Yeah.
J. Reuben Clark Law School.
That's right. Yeah, and I was never a BYU fan. I always was rooting against BYU at the ball games and all that. And I wasn't totally into, just the whole culture of BYU just wasn't something that I was really appealing to me. So I'd sent out applications around the country, really wanted to have a different experience. And so I was looking to go back east. But once I saw the price tag of those other schools versus BYU was a quarter of the price, and it was a good school. So I said, well, I'll just do it. And so I ended up at BYU for 3 years, living in Provo through law school. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and BYU was, being in the law school is a little different, I think, than the undergrad programs. You're not as much part of the BYU culture. You're just trying to survive law school. It was fun. It was never really my cup of tea. I wasn't part of the cultural part of BYU, just more getting through school. Yeah,
and still not married. So
still not married.
So that carries through to
that's right.
the college environment of BYU that didn't go away.
That's right. Yeah, it's one thing to go into BYU single, but quite another to leave BYU single.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody leaves BYU
well put.
single. Yeah, so certainly I'm starting to think, wow, what's going on now? My younger brothers and sisters are all starting to get married now, and I'm still single, so the pressure is on for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
And my parents were good. Any pressure they put on was subtle at best. They weren't in a big rush, but there is definitely that cultural pressure. One of the prophets said, if you're not 25 and married, then you're a nuisance to society at that point.
Wow. Yeah. It's so, and during this time, you're still active. You're still integrated into your local ward, whatever that ward, young adult wards, right? Callings, all of that.
Yep, that's right. Yep. Still very much active in all of that. I was leaders of the young adult programs and helping organize the activities and all of that. Awesome. So that was my upbringing as far as the Mormon life pre-marriage.
Yeah. Wow. So BYU Law School, what's the next step? Where do you go from there to what's next?
So now I'm working at a good sized law firm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Gotcha. Back to Arizona.
Working for a firm that actually was the founding partners were LDS themselves, but it was a litigation law firm, and so I was thrust into the world of business litigation, involved as a grunt man in very high profile litigation cases. Very stressful environment. It was long hours, very intense, and the main owner of this law firm, very intense person, and not one that you can mess up with. Not more than once, he he would yell at me. He would throw stuff at me.
Wow.
And it was just commonplace. That's just what we all expected there. So I didn't last long there. It was very, very intense environment. So I left there, went to another big firm for a while, and eventually, and still single. But after about 5 years at big law firms there in Phoenix doing litigation, I left, and me and two other friends opened up our own shop together and started a law firm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when does marriage enter the picture? I don't know if that's what's next.
Yeah, it's right about then. Just as I'm actually towards the tail end of the second law firm I was working for is when I met my wife, Jolene.
Mm-hmm.
And it was,
we will have on this show as well.
You bet. She's got a great story.
Mm-hmm.
She had recently been divorced, so she also grew up LDS. And her dad and mom actually met on his Mormon mission. They weren't dating or anything at the time. That would have been breaking against the rules. But they eventually met up again at BYU and got married.
Wow.
And she comes from a Cuban family. Her mom is Cuban. And it's a very fun story that she has. But so she had been through this divorce, and she was holding a little housewarming party at her house where she lived. And through a series of friends and friends of cousins, we got connected on this blind date of sort. So I went to her party and got to know her, and we hit it off very quickly. And we were both, by then, we were just about to hit 30 years old by the time we dated and got married. About a 6-month dating period, and which was, I guess, in the Mormon world, maybe average, maybe even a little slower than many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
And so we were married. Actually, so because she had been through the divorce, she had to go through the cancellation process.
Explain that for the Christian listeners.
Because she had been married to her first husband, she had an eternal marriage in the temple
sealing.
The temple sealing. That's right, and so a woman cannot be sealed to more than one man. A man can be sealed to more than one woman.
Mm-hmm. To this day.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right, including the prophet.
Yep.
But that's not the case for the woman. So before she could marry me, she had to have approval from the first presidency of the church to cancel her sealing. And so that's quite a process. Again, you got to go through a lot of interviews and send the paperwork up to see if they will cancel it. Well, knowing that was going to take some time, and with the support of our church leaders, they said, well, you can, as an option, just get married civilly first, and then you can wait a year after your marriage date and then be sealed in the temple for time and all eternity. And so we were actually married in my backyard. That's where our marriage ceremony was, which was actually really neat because we could have our family come, and nieces and nephews were there, people that couldn't attend a temple sealing because you have to be a worthy temple recommend holder to go to a temple marriage. So we could open it up to more people, even some non-members could be there. And so we had a real neat marriage ceremony there. We're just married by our bishop. And then we waited the year, and then we got sealed in the Mesa, Arizona temple a year after our marriage.
Gotcha. Is that the temple you went through the first time?
Yes.
As well? Okay. So temple sealing. I'm not sure if this is kind of a question I probably should have prepped how to word it. What is the difference, as someone who's been through both? Was there a difference in how you viewed your civil marriage versus your temple marriage?
For sure.
And maybe take the listener through, they may not have this concept, applied Mormonism on this spot.
Yes. The civil marriage was definitely a step down, right, from what we were looking forward to. This was just a stopgap, just a temporary thing to get us to the pinnacle of Mormonism, which is that temple marriage, that sealing. And so, the words were different. There was no, we recognized that there was nothing particular about this that would have united our marriage in God's eyes, right? And so it was a civil marriage approved by the state. It was done by our bishop, and the words that would have been used would have been, I'm marrying you till death do you part. And those are the cringe words if you're a Mormon, right? You don't want to hear I'm married till death do you part. I want to hear that I'm married for time and all eternity. And so we didn't have the blessing of those words for time and all eternity. And so we knew we just got to get through this year, and then we can go have that eternal marriage that happens in the temple. So it was definitely a step down.
Yeah. And was there any, maybe it wasn't in this case, but I've heard even anxiety for those who do that. anxiety about, well, what if something happens to one of us before we get the temple sealing? You know, we won't be sealed together. Even if they are civilly married, they're worried as LDS that if we have to, you know, there's this anxiety of getting there.
Yeah. And I could see that. I can't say that we felt any of that.
Cool.
There was something about being 30 by the time you're married in the Mormon church where you're going to see things a little different, you know, versus most who get married when they're 21, 22. I had that almost a 10-year period after my mission where I'm still in the church, but I'm not really fitting. And so by that time I had felt, at least culturally, that I was not necessarily fitting into this program because the next step wasn't happening. It's like I'm supposed to get married. Almost all my friends, my brothers and sisters are married, and I'm not. So I started to feel a bit on the fringe. Not necessarily doctrinally. I still didn't have any basis to question doctrine, but at least culturally and socially, by the time I got married, I was feeling a bit on the fringe. And then marrying a wife who had been through a divorce as well, that would be also a little bit fringe at the time. And so by that point, I'm like, you know, I'm not really, not that I was thinking of leaving or anything, but I'm like, I'm just a little different than the patterned Mormon that follows every step. And so that was starting to actually work in my mind. And I think was part of what happened later on is I did start to question.
What point did you start to question?
It was years after we got married. So
Okay.
so my wife had a daughter, and then we had two sons, and still living at this point. We're living just almost next door to my parents where I grew up. And so we're actually in the same ward where I grew up as a kid.
Wow.
And so that's going to tie you in even more, right? Because I'm growing up around the same bishop that was my bishop when I was a kid. You know, now my young men's leaders and all these people, these are now my neighbors. And so we were very much still strong in it. But eventually questions did start to surface. And at first it was, I mean, the internet's just starting to come out. So it's not like there was, you know, really good access to this stuff. But I'm starting to see stuff pop up. And if I were to try to pinpoint what is the first thing that I saw, I can't even remember, you know, but people are just starting to talk now and internet's coming out. And I wasn't out there looking for anti-Mormon literature, but I am starting to hear things. And I've kind of got that attorney mind, right? Just that very logical. I'm learning as a professional, you know, when I'm working a case up, I'm to turn over every stone.
Yeah, details matter, dates.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
they
right.
line up, stories match.
Yes, that's right. It's because I don't want to be surprised by the time I get to a trial or whatever it might be. And at some point, I think it did occur to me, I'm actually using a different standard. I'm doing that in my professional life, but in my religious life, it's like I feel like I need to check my brain at the door when I go to church. Why is that? You know,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of starting to strike to me, and so I'm just becoming a little more open to hear what is out there, and I think what is underlying all of this is I'm really spiritually very dry. You know, this checking the boxes is not resulting in any spiritual fulfillment. I'm not feeling any closer to God, relationally with God. I feel like there's just very little there for me. And you can only check the boxes and go through the motions for so many years where you start to ask, well, why am I doing this if I'm not actually, you know, if there's not some type of spiritual fruit that I'm told I'm supposed to have and I'm just not having it. Church is becoming very boring for me. I go to church on Sundays and I can hardly stay awake. I'm hearing the same messages over and over.
Yeah.
They're very superficial in the doctrine. You know, any study we do of the Bible or any of the scriptures is just glossing the surface. And so I'm just hearing the same stuff, the same messages. It's be a missionary, do your temple work, you know, it's all mostly moral, just moral teaching than anything else. And I'm just starting to get bored with it. And so I think that's what's underlying this openness that I'm starting to have to see there's actually some questions out there. And I remember some of the first things that I started to hear about was the different versions of Joseph Smith's first vision. I can't even remember how I came across it, probably somewhere on the internet, or I may have heard about it and looked it up. And that was big for me. I grew up with one sanitized version of Joseph Smith's famous first vision, where he supposedly saw God the Father and Jesus Christ in a grove of trees, and they told him not to join any of the churches and that he needed to start a new church. It's actually in their scripture. They say this is the cornerstone of our religion, this first vision. And then I start to see there's actually different versions of that, and I only had been given one version, and they're different on big details, right? I mean, sometimes LDS will say, well, but you look at the accounts of the resurrection in the Bible, and you'll see there's different people there, things like that. So it's not stuff like that, right? It's not things that you can reconcile or harmonize. These are, okay, was it God who was there, or was it an angel? Why did you go? One version would say, well, he went because he wanted to see what church was true. Another version was, it just kind of sounded like he gave the sinner's prayer and was giving his life to the Lord. Just depended on what version you were reading. Why he went and who showed up was all very different. And so as an attorney, I'm like, okay, I know when stories don't line up, something is fishy. If I have a police officer on the stand and on the stand he's saying the light was red, but in his report he's saying the light was green, there's something wrong here. I can't reconcile those. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of stuff I'm starting to see from Joseph Smith on key historical facts about the very origins of the church.
Yeah, especially given, and I'm sure you've seen this kind of this new social media move to claim that nothing was ever hidden. Can I just list a few things? All growing up in your family, teaching Mormonism, hearing Mormonism, attending church, the first vision different. Did you ever hear about seer stones?
No, I heard about the Urim and
Thummim, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How about Joseph Smith's polygamy? I'm just naming some big ones.
I think I would have heard of that, but it would have been a positive spin on it.
Positive spin.
Yeah, but I think I knew polygamy was there.
It had to,
whether it be Joseph Smith or Brigham Young, I knew it was floating around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe not the polyandry.
No, that
part.
Yeah.
Book of Abraham issues in terms of the translation.
No, for sure not.
Or Book of Mormon historical issues. I'm sure you've seen that on social media where it's like, oh no, I've always known about the seer stones and always known about this and that. And like, no, it was never talked about.
No, yeah. I'm trying to think of remember the picture that we had growing up of Joseph Smith translating the Book of Mormon. It's still ingrained in my mind. Mm-hmm. You have the golden plates right in front of him. Mm-hmm. There's a curtain separating he and the scribe who's dictating as he's translating these plates by the power of God.
Right.
And they acknowledge that's not how it happened. He was putting his face into a black hat with these treasure-seeking seer stones, and supposedly words are coming up off these stones, and he's just repeating the words as he sees them on these stones. The plates weren't even in the room when he was doing this.
Right. Did you ever hear about other claimants to Joseph Smith's authority? Did other Mormon groups exist in your mind?
I had some notion of this reorganized LDS church that was still practicing polygamy, and that they were not the true Mormons, of course, but as far as their origins. But that would have been it. The fact that there would have been hundreds of spin-off groups, I definitely would not have heard that.
Yeah. So what was the culture like in terms of talking about this? So, and sorry, I want to take this side tour just to document the culture as it was not that long ago.
Right.
When you first start finding this, Michael God was a big one for me. Adam God. Did you feel safe in talking about it with your parents, with your siblings, with your wife at that time?
No. I buried this for years. Yeah, I wouldn't even talk with my wife about it for quite a long time. There was no space for that at all. Yeah. And I knew that if I was having questions, the problem was me. The problem was not the church. Clearly, my faith is not strong enough. I'm starting to have doubts, which means I'm not praying enough. I'm not reading the scriptures enough. I'm not doing the right things. And so my faith is wavering, and that's where these doubts are coming from. They're coming from Satan, not from any historical issues.
Okay.
And I very much believed that at first.
What were there any other issues? The first vision, that's fascinating too, that angle with stories and the law and your training in that field with that. Were there any others that started to come to your awareness?
I remember the Book of Abraham surfacing pretty quick. That one seemed like the death knell to me. When you look at this, the origins of the Book of Abraham, it's really bad. I mean, there's just no argument to be made, and even the church now has backpedaled from any idea that this was a translation.
Right, but we were taught it was a literal translation.
Oh yes,
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. There's wasn't some inspired catalyst or anything.
No,
like that.
no.
It was, yeah. And
how the church could say otherwise, I don't know. We actually. We still have these funeral texts that he claimed were the Book of Abraham, and he's got Egyptian letters on them, like as if he is actually working to translate them. Mm-hmm. Joseph Smith never claimed it was just a catalyst for inspiration. No. He claimed it was translation, and now the church is changing its historical revision.
Yeah, and I remember my grandmother even taking me to the facsimiles and going through the text and showing how it connected to the facsimiles and how this was an Egyptian endowment.
That's right.
She knew her Nibley as well.
That's right.
So, there's people like Kwakuel and stuff that can claim otherwise. This is what we grew up in. I mean, I don't know. Like
there was no other version.
He seems to he projects like onto the church something that was not there, and then claims we're overreacting and lying. And it's or stories like ours are doing so.
Yeah.
But no, it's a culture of don't question, just almost this over rigid, almost brittle certainty that's demanded to fit in.
That's right.
And so that's starting to cave. Do you recall the first time one of the first times you started asking people or bringing this up, or did they ask you, or, I mean, how did this eventually come out?
Yeah, at some point I start opening up to my wife. I can see she's starting to get frustrated because I'm becoming more and more spiritually passive. As the father of my home, I'm supposed to be the spiritual leader, right? I was supposed to be the one driving the family to church and getting us to family home evening and doing scripture study every morning and family prayer every day. And I wasn't doing those things because I'm just starting to feel spiritually dry, and that none of this is doing anything for me. And so at some point, I'm even starting to very much back away from church callings. I always had a church calling, and I'm now wanting less and less significant callings, more background type callings. Get me in the scouting program where I can just go do campouts with the boys.
Yeah.
I don't want to be teaching Sunday school and things like that. And so I'm getting less and less removed from those callings as well. So she's sensing this, and it's starting to actually affect our marriage for sure. And so at some point I do start sharing with her. I remember we would go on hikes quite often, and this is kind of our time to share what's on our hearts. And I started to share some questions with her. First, dealing more with cultural issues. I really struggled with tithing, not the idea of paying it. I always did pay it, and I get the idea of it as a whole, but the way it was done, the obligatory nature of it, every year I have to sign up for tithing settlement and actually report to the bishop whether I am a full tithe payer, doing this in front of my wife and kids. And the bishop would actually ask, are you a full tithe payer or not? Did I pay a full 10% of my income or not? And I remember asking my wife, why is it that of all the commandments we're asked to follow, the only one where they drag me into the bishop's office every year in front of my wife and kids and ask me specifically, am I doing this one? It's the one that has to do with money. They don't do that for any of the other commandments,
right?
And so I'm starting to share things like that and questions that are bothering me. And she was surprisingly open. As I started to share with her, she was actually very receptive. She wasn't, condemning in any way. And so that gave me an outlet a bit as Jolene and I could start asking questions together. And so that actually, for a time, I think brought us closer together.
Wow.
As we started to go on this journey together of asking questions and seeing, do we really believe this? We both were raised in this, but we haven't really thought this through. And is this the way that we want to be raising our family? Is it true? For us, at the end of the day, truth really mattered. I wasn't if it wasn't true, I wasn't going to be okay with it, I don't think. And so we started to kind of go on the journey together for a time. Yeah. It didn't, my wife is very passionate. And so I think for me, because I'm just so careful and logical, I will turn over every stone. I'm very deliberate in my decisions that I make. I'm knowing this is going to really upset things within my family and everything. My whole world is wrapped around this. And so I'm not going to just up and leave one day. And so I'm going very slow. And, at some point I may be even thinking, well, maybe I can just kind of stay in this for cultural reasons. It's a good way to raise my family. If I leave the church, my kids will probably become drug addicts and, they're going to fall apart. That's kind of what you're
told,
right?
Rate of horribles.
Yeah. Yeah. But Jolene, she's not a fence sitter. She's like, I'm all in or I'm all out. That's just her personality. Very passionate, that Cuban blood in her. Yeah. And so as I start asking these questions, she starts looking at stuff too. And you'll have to get her story someday, but she ends up actually leaving the Orthodox Mormon Church to join one of the many spin-off groups that was led by a guy named Denver Snuffer. And he's right here in Utah. He's an attorney that has, over the last 10 years or so, has kind of formed his own little following. And the essence of it is they still believe in Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. They're very traditional in that way. But they believe Brigham Young and every prophet after kind of took the church astray. And so it's a bit of a restoring the restoration. Is essentially what it is. It's like we're just doing a redo here. Yep. It started off good with Joseph and then it went bad. And so we got to bring it back to the roots of Joseph Smith without the polygamy. They don't do polygamy like some other groups do, though.
Yeah, so they have their arguments to claim he wasn't.
Yes. Yeah. Well, they claim he was a polygamist, but it was spiritual marriages.
Oh, spiritual marriages. So they redefine it. Oh, yes. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
So what do you think when this happens? So is she coming to you saying, hey, there's answers to some of these questions?
Yes. Yeah. So she's getting tied into this group, starting to go, instead of to our church building, she's going to meet in home church groups, and they would take the sacrament together, which is a big no-no in the Mormon church. You don't do that outside the authority of the church. And I'm thinking, wow, this is actually getting serious here. And I remember being on a camping trip with my boys, and I was talking to her, and she says, I think I'm going to go get baptized into this church. And I'm like, can you wait till I get back? This is so new, and this is a big deal. So can you wait till I get back? But she's like, no, I'm going. And so she did, and she went and got baptized that weekend. And so she's been rebaptized into a fringe Mormon group. And that really kind of put a dagger between us, where I felt like we were kind of exploring this together. And then she leapfrogged me, I felt, and decided to do her own thing. And so from that point, things really started to spiral downward with she and I, because I was not ready. And if I was going to leave, it was not going to be into this Denver Snuffer group, because my problems went to Joseph Smith. Exactly. He was not the answer to my problems. He was the problem for me.
Right. And the First Vision emphasis makes sense there.
That's right.
Something that they don't seem to emphasize much either in my experience.
That's right.
Those differences.
I had read he was coming out with books, Denver Snuffer at the time, and very you still have all of everything based on obedience, and now actually the bar is higher. He's promoting that you actually need to have essentially a visitation from Jesus. He calls it the second comfort. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's now your sign of that you're saved, essentially. Yeah. And so now the bar is getting higher and higher, and it just all seemed kind of crazy. So now I felt like, okay, now we're going from big problem to even a bigger problem, and it just wasn't speaking to me at all.
And we'll cover her side of this, of course, when we have her on. But so at what point, like, where are you heading as she's in this group? Yes. In terms of what to replace it with, or as we both know, most people don't replace it with much of anything, and it's just left to the, what is it? So yeah, where are you heading in this?
Looking back, I'm really grateful. As hard as that made things in our marriage for a time, it was a catalyst. It's going this direction. the kids go 1 week with her to this, what I thought was a very crazy group. The other week they go to me to the LDS church, which I wasn't. Status quo is no longer an option, and so I need to do something. I need to find out what is true and get my family on the same page. Otherwise, this is going to be a total train wreck. And I remember going in with her to meet with the stake president and the bishop, and she had her letter of resignation, knowing that if she didn't do that, she was going to get excommunicated. I was so conflicted because I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but I definitely didn't have a foot in where she was going, and I felt betrayed and all these emotions that were coming. Hard time because I didn't know where to go. So for a time, I actually retreated back into what I knew, and I tried to see, well, maybe I can pick myself up by the bootstraps. And you know how it is with Jolene leaving, I'm now getting pats on the back from all the church leaders saying, come on, brother, you can do this. You're doing good. Hold to the rod, stay strong, for a short while. But I knew it was disingenuous because I really was not believing it either. And so it just put us in a place where we needed to go find truth. Severed since Jolene left the church, and I don't know where to go. I remember being very confused. There was not a point where one being that it just didn't make sense to me logically, and with reasonable inferences, I had to believe there was a God. And so I remember thinking, I don't know anything anymore about this Book of Mormon and all that stuff, but we have this thing called the Bible that's been around for a lot longer, and there's words of Jesus. So I actually remember I would drop off my boys at church. I would go to the first hour, drop them off at Sunday school, and then I would leave and go to a nearby park, and I just started reading the Bible because sometimes my elders quorum president would walk by, and he'd see me at the park and kind of see how I'm doing, because I was supposed to be in the church. Understanding what I'm reading, because I'm still reading it through the Mormon lens, as I always had. And that's not an easy thing to get past. But I remember just being very sincere. And if I've been fooled, I've been fooled. I just want to see this for what it is. And slowly things. And so that was an important part, was just opening up the Bible. I still had skepticism toward the Bible, though, as to whether it was really reliable. And tampered with over the years. And so I still had that in the back of my head. And so that is also affecting the way that I'm reading the Bible. I don't fully trust it. But as our marriage continues to get worse, see where God really started to move. He always is, but he just seemed to put it in high gear for us. And he started to put Christians in our life. For example, we were going into this Christian couple and struck up a conversation with them. And it turned out they lived just around the corner from us. Wow. And so we became good friends with them, with Amy and Sidish Gamiri. They now Jolene and Amy, who she had met, started to go on walks together. And at this point, Jolene's needing an outlet because our marriage is spiraling downward. One of the foundations of your marriage is your religion, and your family, my family and everything, and that it's all getting torn apart. We just have no foundation anymore, and so it's all starting to fall apart. Crumble the foundation, those things are now being highlighted, and so it's getting harder and harder. And so I think as Jolene is expressing this to her new Christian friend, some counselors that we could go meet with, and I took one of the names and looked him up on the internet. I remember, and I couldn't find him anywhere on the internet. What a weird home. And so me and Jolene showed up at his home, and it was about probably an hour into our counseling session that I realized he was also a pastor of a nearby Christian church. On here, right? And, and as a Mormon, I had these preconceived ideas of what these evangelical pastors were like. I'm looking for the gold rings.
Exactly.
Looking for money,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's so true.
And so we probably spent 2 or 3 hours there on his back patio as he's trying to get in. Who came to Gilbert, Arizona, and planted a church there, and just a really humble, sincere person. I could see that I tried to pay him for the session. He wouldn't take my money. As I was expressing to him my frustrations of my wife, who's in my mind is abandoning me and betraying me and not respecting me, and God, and I'm like, I don't know right now. I believe there is a God, but I just don't know anything. I'm starting to adopt more relativism, and I also had a very close friend who was more to me. It felt so kind and tolerant, where I didn't have to make decisions on things and didn't really have to have my own convictions, and just nobody knows, and so everybody can have their own. My family can have theirs. It'll all work out in the end. I really wanted to believe that, but I couldn't get there logically. If there is a God, and I believe there is, they're not consistent with one another. They contradict one another. They cannot be harmonized. And so I couldn't get there logically down the path of relativism as much as I wanted to, because it feels so. To me, just point blank, he said, well, do you believe in absolute truth? And I hesitated, but I had to say, yes, I do. There must be. And because that's going to be what keeps your family and your marriage intact. And so he kind of gave me that challenge. And from there, continued to stay in touch with that pastor. I continued to open up the Bible to see for myself what it is. I had no idea as a Mormon where this Bible came from. Right, the Book of Mormon I knew came from these golden plates that fell out of the sky, but I had no idea where the Bible came from, and I certainly. To me, because my mindset was, okay, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not going to be fooled a second time. And the idea that I was even because I always thought, if it's not Mormonism, then it's nothing, because this is the best that Christianity has to offer. We are not just Christians, we're the best. never even crossed my mind in this journey for my whole life. It just never even would have considered that. I'm like, well, I can just be a good person. I can go where I want, when I want. I'm very much loving nature at this point. I'm going on camping trips. I'm backpacking with my boys. I'm experiencing God in a different way through nature. I'm feeling like, and all these things are things, that's where I wanted to go. But yet something was pulling me to the Word of God in the Bible. And it started to reveal itself in surprising ways as the blinders were removed from my eyes, when I was no longer looking at it through the Mormon lens. And I gave myself permission to just read it for what it says and not try to force it into what I already believed, as I had done my whole life. It became transforming to me. And I began to see that there was a different God and there was a different gospel in the pages of that Bible that had never been taught to me. And I was shocked when I began to see it. And it began to transform the way that I was seeing Christianity.
Yeah. This process of research and God working on you, how long would you say this was? Just to give a sense, because I know some people, even in their questioning of Mormonism phase, wherever they end up, sometimes it's really quick, sometimes it's years. Take us through kind of the sense of time in that story.
As far as the original question asking that are leading up to the climax that I've been talking about, that was years for sure, where I was starting to unwind some of these historical problems in Mormonism. That was definitely a period of years, because I would find something and then I'd shelf it, It's just this roller coaster, and there's guilt and all that thing associated with it. I can't talk with anybody about it, and so that part is definitely a period of years, and it's not until I start sharing it with Jolene, and then I've got a good friend that we played tennis with a couple nights a week. He's kind of on the same journey, and he's seen the same types of things, and so once you start talking about it, it escalates, right? Mm-hmm. Once you have some avenues to express it, and so. That part was years. As far as when Jolene left, and now I'm beginning to explore the Bible and starting to see a different side of Christianity that I didn't know existed. That's probably 6-8 months that I'm going through that process, exploring a little bit more about the reliability of the Bible. Our friends invited us to their home, and they showed us the DVD. I think it's a Joseph Smith versus the Bible or something like that. And it was the first time that I'd heard any argument for the reliability of the Bible. And it talked about the manuscript evidence for the Bible. This is not just a book that fell out of the sky. It's not a book where I need to take somebody's word for it. That we have so much support in the way of manuscripts. I'm sure you have many shows on here, that people can explore, But when I began to see that this Bible was just so real, right? It took place in real times, at real places, with real people, and we can verify this through tens of thousands of ancient manuscripts, through archaeological evidence, through fulfilled prophecy, and all these different things. Compared to the Book of Mormon, we don't even know which continent this took place on, let alone the people or any artifacts or any manuscripts. Even the language that it was supposedly written in doesn't actually exist. And so there was just this stark contrast between the way the Bible came to be through God guiding history in real times and places versus the Book of Mormon that just fell out of the sky. And I've got to take somebody's word for it. And that was really, really freeing for me when I began to see that I could ask these questions in Christianity. And the more I asked and the deeper I looked, the more answers I found. And I actually didn't have to check my brain at the door anymore when I thought about religion. I could use the same way of thinking in my profession of how I work a case over and try to find truth. I could use those same tools in this context of religion and the Bible, and just look at the evidence and see what it says.